Welcome to the Revision Wizards podcast. I'm Lon Varnadore, and I'm joined by my weirdly dressed co-host V.E. Griffith and Miss Catherine M.H. This is episode 60.
Today, we're returning to Editing by Parts miniseries. In this episode, which is number 2, we'll be talking about editing world building.
Okay, so what is world building?
It's that thing you don't do.
Yeah, it's a thing you do when you make something and then do other stuff. You write down an idea, then it doesn't work, so you cross it out and you work on something else.
There you go. That sounds about right.
World building is creating literally, the world in which your story is in. This could be the setting of just a chapter, so it could be just the room that someone's in. It's building it all the way outwards. So you've got the room, you have the house, you have the town it's in, you have the county it's in, the country it's in, the continent it's on, the planet it's in, the solar system. It is quite literally building out your world so it seems realistic to the reader.
So what does that entail for you, Miss Catherine? Because we always know that you and I are different.
So different. It's rare that I actually edit world building. It's one of the things I'm super excited about the most, and it's the only thing that really gets planned in my pantsing idea. The world makes sense to me, and the cultures make sense to me. If anything, my editing is I have to cut back. So this is where I am cutting out things because I am a Tolkien when it comes to world building.
Lon, what about you?
There are times when I'll do what Catherine will do when it comes to writing and figuring things out. I don't plan, but it just sort of comes out in that first draft, and then as I'm sort of reading it and going through editing, I'll kind of just look at it and so kind of figure out, does it make sense? Does it work? So most of the time it does. Sometimes it doesn't, and I have to stop and you know hit throw it away and do something else. But or fix it in some other way. But it completely depends on the story. Really, like it also depends on if it's actually prevalent to the story or not. Because there are times when you might just toss it because oh, it's a really pretty idea. Does it work for the story? Well, not really. Then you gotta toss it.
That makes some sense. I, generally speaking, don't do a lot of world building in my first drafts. I do very dialogue heavy first drafts. And so I have to go back in later and add things that I want the world to have in it that give the reader a sense of the universe or the world that we're in. Apparently, Miss Catherine thinks that I don't do any.
It's a joke. Is it though? Is it? No.
Is it?
We're gonna see when you finally get to my edits.
I've been reading them. That's why the joke came up. All right. If the grass doesn't eat somebody at some point in one of your books, I'm going to be really upset.
Oh, what am I gonna do with you?
Wow. Wow.
So
Okay.
VE, I guess the only thing I do when it comes to editing for world building is making it realistic. So I will do extra research to make sure that the thing that I am talking about actually makes sense. So if I'm doing like my space opera, I'll do I'll write however I want it to be, and then I will edit the science into it so it's correct. When I did Scandal's Pen, I edited in the clothing correctly because I actually went out and got myself historical clothing so I could figure out how all of it moves. So that would be my editing for world building. When it comes to you adding in, what things are you really looking for first when you come to editing your world building?
I'm looking for 3 basic things, and they can be difficult to add depending on the situation that the character is in. I look at the senses that the character experiences. I wanna pay attention to the culture of the world, and I wanna pay attention to the scenery of the world. In terms of senses, you can do a lot with your senses that cover the scenery. I wanna pay attention to what he sees. Obviously, humans, generally speaking, are very visual creatures, so what the character sees is important. What does the building that you're walking into look like? Is it run down? Is it dusty? Is it brand spanking new? Is it gleaming metal? Is it gleaming glass? Is there concrete falling off of it? Those kinds of things make for an environment that the character is going to have to interact with. I want to know about his hearing. What do you hear when you're in this situation? Or if you're in a city, are you hearing the noise of traffic? Are you hearing construction equipment backing up? Beep, beep, beep. Are you hearing people? Are you hearing other kinds of sounds? What do you hear? If you're in a forest, are you hearing birds and monsters or, grass that eats you? What does that sound like? When you touch something, how does it feel? When your character eats something, they, stop and have dinner, you can give a sense of what the food tastes like, what the world tastes like. Is everything bland and boring? Is it spiced and flavorful? Is it painfully hot? What does food taste like? If if a world has food that is you might think of as painfully hot, can I describe how hot that is? For example, at a local Indian restaurant that I patronize, they have mild, medium, and hot, and then they have Indian mild, Indian medium, and Indian hot if you want extra spices. So, how can I describe that kind of flavor? And the last thing that I go through is smell. If I'm in a place, what does it smell like? If I'm in a city, do I smell car and diesel exhaust? Do I smell decaying plant matter? If I'm in a forest, do I smell bear poop? Do I smell sewage? What does it smell like?
Makes sense.
Makes sense, makes sense. Yeah.
Do you write with the senses in mind, Lon, or is that like a natural piece for your writing?
It's natural that comes to me, like, I'll probably throw in a smell or sight or some type of hear something that they hear, and then later on, as I am editing, I will also sort of go through. I won't exactly do what one writing mentor did, which is he did an entire draft of just smell draft. He wanted to make sure that every about 3rd page, he added a smell.
That's different.
It makes a certain amount of sense because if you want to include senses in your world, you have to make a concerted effort to do so because generally speaking, what most authors will do is they will deal with sight and maybe they'll deal with hearing. And that's about it.
You know what's funny is I don't write with taste. I'll mention the food, but normally it's food that, like, people are very used to eating. I'm talking about pizza or, like, in my space opera, it's gonna be, like, normal foods that we would think of that I don't know, I just don't describe taste. I'll go all the other ones, but taste is very rare.
Well, when you're eating a monster, you need to know how it tastes.
I have not had a chance to eat monsters yet in any of my stories.
Well, there's an idea for you.
Alright, so on this list of yours, VE, you've got culture. Now, culture is its own I feel like editing world building in general could be such a huge thing. Like, we could break this down into complete, like, own series. So when you're talking culture, are you going, like, super big, or are you doing something on a smaller scale?
I'm generally doing small scale stuff. I'm looking at how how my main character or my viewpoint character interacts with the world around them and what they see. So, are people that he deals with, and my main character in my series is a male, uh, is are the people that he deals with rude? Are they snippy? Are they short like New Yorkers, or are they southern? Not, you know what I mean.
Look, man, we've been in the car once and I was correct. They should have literally honked the horn at that person that tried to cut us off, okay? Maybe speed up a little bit, and then we wouldn't have had such problems.
Like the stereotype of New York City residents. You don't live in New York City.
No, but I grew up there. Just dig that hole a little deeper. No, it's alright. New Yorkers are a pain in the asses to everybody. It's fine, I get it. We have a right to be. We're New Yorkers.
Or do they turn on the Southern charm like they do where I come from? "Hi, sweethearts, nice to see you. Would you like some pecan pie?"
Until they say, "Bless your heart."
Oh,
Oh,
bless
bless
your
your heart.
heart.
Yeah. For those of you who do not know, "Bless your heart" is not a compliment.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Yes.
so I wanna pay attention to how other characters interact with the main character. I don't want them to just have a conversation. I want to get a flavor of what's polite, what's not, how your average citizen would react to a situation.
Hmm,
Those kinds of things are important to me, and I don't have to go overboard with them. I don't have to have a cultural scene. I don't have to have a long tell about the culture usually, but I do wanna make sure that I give a flavor, especially if it's different from what your average American is going to expect, because cultures vary place to place, even within the same country, we know that. We've just laughed about that, and so I want to give a flavor of that.
Lon, you build literally in space operas. How is culture edited in your books? Is it something, like, that's focused on or not as much?
It depends really on what what it again, it just sort of comes down to story and what do I need versus if I wanna focus on something. There's been some stories I've written that are a little bit more based on the sort of in quasi-individual cultures, quote, unquote, of different places like Mars, and then there was the asteroids and further out there were different cultures that sort of expanded and came to be because of XYZ reasons. And that was part of not a quasi focus of the book, but it was something I wanted to talk about a little bit more versus some things, which is just, I'm going to take one or two of these ideas and I'm just going to kind of tie them very loosely together and see if this sort of hangs there and works well.
Mhm.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But and also a big thing is also dialogue. Just thinking in how people talk is a great way to sort of show certain parts of a culture as well.
I agree, yeah. I think with me, culture is easy for me to write in, so the editing isn't too bad. The my space opera is different because I have two separate time frames separated by 500 years, and in one chapter, I've got the culture that's established already on this spaceship, and I have the other one that's trying to establish the culture as they're starting the ship's flight. So it's a very interesting play to do where you're still doing the modern stuff that we expect here on Earth, but you're trying to put it into, like, a spaceship. So in that case, that editing has been difficult in the sense of 'cause I pants this stuff anyway. So I'm like, "Ugh, where does this come from?" And then something will happen in the future that I'm like, "Ooh, I've gotta put that now somehow into the past." Like, that has to come from somewhere. So that part will be a little tricky editing-wise for me.
And on the reverse side, when it comes to something like in a fantasy context, for example, you've got to worry about other things besides just the culture, like culture of magic and culture of and plus in fantasy stories there's usually a little bit more want and desire to sort of show different like fantasy cultures that you're sort of come up with.
You wanna know the rules behind different races in places. You wanna see that. That part is gonna be a much bigger aspect of that world building.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very much gonna be dependent on genre and genre conventions. If you're writing a cozy mystery set in Maine, you may have less cultural touchstones than you would in an epic fantasy that's, 2,000 pages long. So it's gonna depend on genre conventions and on your particular story. There's no real right or wrong way to do it, but it is worth thinking about so that your world is believable and is a well-rounded world. It's not just flat and, we have a building. That doesn't a white building that's nondescript.
Now, if you're on the opposite end, 'cause see that one of your other points was, the scenery or maybe basically, like, what's around in that zone, right? So we're not in that white room. I am the opposite. I go through and I detail everything. There is everything in this. I am that Tolkien writer who tells you that there's a bug under the leaf 7 feet away under, like, 6 trees over there. I'm giving you that information. So when I'm going in and doing my editing, I have to cut. So I have to look and be like, "What is actually vital to my story? Is it important that there is a bug under a leaf all the way over there? No, unless that bug has a really big reason." There are small little things that I will leave in as little breadcrumbs throughout my book for certain things. I could be really descriptive on clothing, as, VE knows, but my clothing is based on certain aspects. Certain things that are happening is based on certain colors. So anytime, Eleanor goes out to do something that's batshit insane, she's usually in the color red, or Theodore's in the color red. So one of them is in this color that's bright and bold and usually dangerous. So like I'll look for little things like that, and that helps me cut back on all of the other descriptions that I could have. I'm going to really look to see what's important. What is building this scene so I don't have to describe this room every time you walk into it. I'm only going to look to describing it once unless something changes in it. So that's my editing when it comes to world building is how much can I take out of the book. Before VE even got the book, I cut about 40,000 words, and most of that was description and like 3 extra chapters.
One of the things that you can do, I saw a really good example of this in the movie The Matrix, where everything that's in The Matrix has a green color to it. There's sort of a green cast or a green tint over the entire world, whereas everything in the real world is blue. That's never explained explicitly in the movie, and I only know about it because I've watched some of the featurettes at the end of the DVD. But that is a very deliberate choice that the cinematographers made, and so it's an approach that in the right genre, in the right situation, an author can use to delineate various
Mhm.
settings in their world.
Yeah, that's a big one. So it's the small things, like your world building, while yes, important, and it is extremely important to the author to understand the world building, your reader does not need to be bogged down with world building. Now, certain genres, totally acceptable to have more world building than others. We talked about fantasy, science fiction, they usually have more of that world building. Science fiction wise, you're gonna have more of that science world building in there most of the time. Depends on what kind of sci-fi you're doing. And again, you're not gonna have like a thriller be super detailed unless the detail is literally the world building is trying to kill the person. Then that would be interesting. It's the grass. The grass is trying to eat people. So yeah, so world building, it's a fine line, I think. And the more you write and read, I think the better you get at editing and writing world building.
Very much so.
Like everything else, it just comes down to practice. The more you do it, the better you get.
It
Is there anything in particular that you do differently, Lon, for your book's world building and editing wise?
I try to sort of when I'm trying to write a scene or something, I know I will try to, like, get either find a picture or something that will work or as, like, something to sort of, like, look at as I'm writing it, and then even as I'm editing, I'll kinda go back and look over and go, "No, wait, that's not really what I wanted," or something like that, or I have to change something because of, "Oh, the guy's coat's wrong." So, wait, I have to put it's a more of a blue than a green or whatever. But I do try to look for I do put more sensory things in, more like VE, but I don't find myself being overly I am not the Tolkien type writer where I will just write all of these details. Yeah, I'm sort of like in the middle between the 2 of you.
Do you so I know for me, which my present writing self loves to do, but my editing self hates my past for, I'll be writing and then I'm like, "Ooh, wait, I'm gonna change this how this person looks." And then I'll leave a note that goes, "From here on out, you're gonna be like this." and then from there on out, I write that, but I never go back to fix it until editing self goes back. And that is a I really curse out my writing, like, my past self every time I do that. But I also because, I use this wonderful thing called OneNote to, keep all of my notes together and all of my stuff in order and organized. If I change things, it goes in there too. So I have whole sections of, like, this is my world building, my vision boards and stuff, and I'll put in notes of, like, this is now what this is as of page this on this day. So this way my editing self can curse myself out more when it comes time to it.
Those kinds of changes are an excellent use of your story Bible, which is what you're talking about. And we've talked about story Bibles in the past, but you want to make sure as you're writing and as you make these kinds of changes that you keep your Bible up to date and you do a pass where you make sure that all of your characters match your Bible. So your Bible should always be current, and when you do your editing passes and you're looking at characters or you're looking at settings where you might have changed the way a building looks or the color of the spray paint graffiti or something like that, that goes into your Bible so that you can cross check later.
Exactly.
Yeah, it'll help with editing that if you've got your, series Bible that is up to date with all of the stuff, you can then cross-reference it, which really does help, especially if you're building huge worlds, you have a complicated culture, you're going into all those details, you're trying to have that science, having that science background of, "This is how an actual engine works," or something like that. It really helps you to then cross-reference when you're doing your editing for your world building. Lon or not Lon, VE, do you ever change anything in the middle of writing and then have to leave yourself a note, "I'll go back and finish that later," or are you the type who goes back and changes it?
No, I don't go back and change when I'm doing first drafting. I work very hard to keep forward momentum in my first drafts because I am the sort of author I have learned that will go over and over and over and over and over a first chapter to make sure that I get it absolutely perfect. I can't do that if I'm going to make any progress in my manuscript. So the only way that I can do it is through the story Bible method. So I go edit my story Bible and say, I changed this in chapter 5. I need to go back in 1, 2, 3, and 4 and fix it.
Makes sense.
So what about you, Lon? Do you do that?
I will very much, as Catherine does, with write myself a little note. It's like, oh, from here on, it's such and such. Won't go back. Well, just not even gonna go back. And then when I run into that note as I'm editing, it's like I gotta go back and do this all over again.
Now, I have a question for you. Are your notes nice to yourself? Because my notes are not.
Oh no, 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 no.
Mine are like, "Fuck you, bitch. You just changed his eye color. Shut the fuck up and just keep writing." And then, it'll be from there on, I'm like, "Oh, I changed his eye color."
Yep,
I meant my notes polite because if I don't, I will get so depressed at how terrible my writing is. I already get depressed about how terrible my writing is, so I don't need to make it worse on myself. So
Let me add this. His writing is not bad, friends. His writing is not bad. As I'm reading.
you can hear the whistling sound of how hard it sucks. So I want to make sure also in case I die and somebody's going through my manuscript.
Never thought of that.
wow, he was really to himself.
Exactly. 100 years from now when people are going through my sucky writing, I wanna make sure that I appear not quite as neurotic as I actually am.
There was a full draft of my space opera that it starts off in being like, "Hey, pick a name for this character," and I left it in that. I still hadn't picked a name for this character by the end of the book, and it just kept getting worse and worse the more this character was, like, brought up here and there. It'd be like, "You still didn't fucking pick a name, bitch?" Like, and it just kept going till the end, and I can't remember what name I picked for this poor person. But I do
Wow,
know I took, like, a
wow.
combination of the amount of initial the first initial or, like, first letter of, like, the long sentence that it
Mhm,
finally got to by the end of when I've chosen his name, um, and then we
mhm.
had to go back through and search for all those sections and stick his name in, and it's just really funny to, like, watch how it was like, "Please pick a name. Let's insert a name here. insert a name. You still haven't picked a name. What is wrong with you? And it just, like, kept going. It'd be real interesting, whoever read that version.
That actually is an important part of world building. Names are important and they can indicate things about where people come from and what their culture looks like. Just like in the real world, your culture can determine not necessarily what your name is, but can give you a set of names to choose from that indicate where you're from or what your cultural background might be. And so, if you're trying to write diverse characters, you want to go ahead and make sure that you pay attention to that aspect of culture.
That's very true, which is interesting because I don't think much in that sense of names. I will look through baby names because I own multiple baby name books, which originally terrified my fiancé the first time I came home with aisle of baby name books, and he's like, "Aren't you telling me something?" And I was like, "I haven't figured out a name for this character yet." He's like, "Never mind." Usually, I'm looking for the name, which is gonna build a character, which is then suddenly going to put a world in. Once I have the character's name, the world's kinda builds around that, and then all of the other character names get based off of the world and the culture that appears in my office, my little green couch, and the pigeons. You weren't here for last episode, Lon, but I have this weird little world.
Sounds like it, but hey, I go with something even almost more specific than the character name. Different, sorry, not more specific or less specific. Just I will do what they might be holding,
Hmm,
like if it's a weapon or if it's like a cup or something, and then I kind of like just can go from there and sort of start to build outward from that. 9 times out of 10, it's usually a gun of some kind
that's cool.
or sword or something. So
Alright, VE, where does your world building come from?
It comes from hell.
So the demons just whisper in your ear, huh?
Yes, because I haven't taken my medication.
well,
Alright, so he trips friends, that's how he figures out his world building. No.
yeah, basically.
Carlos Castaneda and the magic mushrooms.
hmm Hey,
Usually, I start on the larger end. I start with buildings, I start with smells, I start with grass, I start with character appearance, and then I go downward into smaller stuff toward, for example, character is holding a book. What does the book look like? What does the book feel like? Is it small? Is it large? Does it have foil on the cover? What do the edges look like? Is it a painted edge? Is it a straight edge like most modern books that you see? Is it an edge where it's ridged like some literary fiction that's supposed to look old-timey? What does the book look like? And those are things that I would notice and that a character would notice when they're looking at, for example, a book of magical something or other.
right,
And those kinds of details can be important in the genre in which I write. So I pay attention to those little things, but those tend to come after the larger overall world.
That's fascinating. I don't think I could picture having, like, a world and then zooming in on it. I always have to have something and then zoom out on it.
That's because you're weird.
I uh, yeah, I can kind of do both, but it depends. Again, story. Like it depends on if I have like the idea, the character first, or is it more the world, or is it something even more strange, like with the names of the gods.
I think so. In other words, there's no right way or wrong way to edit world building. We all have different ones.
Yep,
We do have different ones, but in some ways we all have to attack the same problems. The difference is gonna be just how we attack them.
exactly. Yep. So,
Alright,
all
so
right.
I guess that does it, and we will sign off.
Stay magical.
Bye.